there was a famine in the land. So a man from Bethlehem in Judah, together with his wife and 2 sons, went to live a while in the country of Moab. The man's name was Elimelech. His wife's name was Naomi, and the names of his 2 sons were Mahlon and Chilion. They were Ephrathites from Bethlehem, Judah. And they went to Moab and lived there. Now Elimelech, Naomi's son, died, and she was left with her 2 sons. They married a Moabite woman, one named Orpah and the other Ruth. After they had lived there about 10 years, both Mahlon and Chilion also died, and Naomi was left without her 2 sons and her husband. When Naomi heard in Moab that the Lord had come to the aid of his people, providing food for them, she and her daughters-in-law prepared to return home from there. With her 2 daughters-in-law, she left the place where she had been living and set out on the road that would take them back to the land of Judah. Then Naomi said to her 2 daughters-in-law, "Go back, each of you, to your mother's home. May the Lord show you kindness as you have shown kindness to your dead husbands and to me. May the Lord grant that each of you will find rest in the home of another husband." Then she kissed them goodbye, and they wept aloud and said to her, "We will go back with you to your people." But Naomi said, "Return home, my daughters. Why would you come with me? Am I going to have any more sons that would become your husbands? Return home, my daughters. I am too old to have another husband. Even if I thought there would still hope for me, even if I had a husband tonight and gave birth to sons, would you wait until they grew up? No, my daughters, it's more bitter for me than for you, because the Lord's hand has turned against me." As they wept aloud again, then Orpah kissed her mother-in-law goodbye, but Ruth clung to her. "Look," said Naomi, "your sister-in-law is going back to her people and her gods. Go back with her." But Ruth replied, "Don't urge me to leave you or to turn back from you. Where you go, I will go. Where you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people, and your God, my God. Where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. May the Lord deal with me, be it ever so severely, if even death separates you and me." When Naomi realized that Ruth was determined to go back with her, she stopped urging her. So the 2 women went on until they came to Bethlehem. When they arrived in Bethlehem, the whole town was stirred because of them, and the women exclaimed, "Can this be Naomi?" "Don't call me Naomi," she told her. "Call me Mara, because the Almighty has made my life very bitter. I went away full, but the Lord has brought me back empty. Why call me Naomi? The Lord has afflicted me. The Almighty has brought misfortune upon me." So Naomi returned from Moab, accompanied by Ruth the Moabite, her daughter-in-law, arriving in Bethlehem as the barley harvest was beginning. The Lord is still speaking.
Wherever you go, I shall shall I be buried beside you. We will be together forever, and our love will be the gift of our love. We will be together forever, and our love will be the gift of our love.
Amen. So we're in the book of Ruth. No more Exodus and the law. No more of that lunatic Paul. Now we're here to share a story that seems kind of out of cycle. In fact, it's not often used in sermons. Let me take this off. It's not often used in sermons. Caesar and I were talking in the meeting last week about how difficult it was finding hymns that were already written related to Ruth. And I had the same problem with trying to find a liturgy. Preachers don't use it that much. We use little bits of it, but not that much at all. But I thought I'd share it with you for the next 4 weeks. We'll do a chapter a week. And just point out some things in there that I think are relevant to us, to our faith, and to what this story can bring to us in the world that we live in today. It's all about the covenant. Pray with me. Fill my cup, Lord. I lift it up, Lord. Let it overflow with love. Fill my cup, Lord. I lift it up, Lord. Let it overflow with love. Speak, Lord, for we, your people, are listening. Amen. There was a famine in the land of Judah. Not sure how much of the area was impacted, but we know that the city of Bethlehem got hit, which is interesting because Bethlehem means house of bread. The house of bread didn't have any. The people were starving, and there appeared to be no relief in sight because of the famine. A man named Elimelech, which means God is king, took off for Moab with his wife Naomi, which means pleasant, and their 2 young sons, Milon and Kilion, which is generally described as meaning sickness and weakness. Interesting how descriptive the names were. The story takes place because a man who had it so untenable in his homeland that he was willing to risk what little he had and become a refugee. He was willing to pack up his belongings and his family and walk, and because that's how they went places back then. He was willing to walk 2,100 miles to another land on the other side of the Dead Sea, seeking relief. He didn't want to go. Cohabitating with foreigners was taboo with the Israelites. They were too different. They worshiped different gods. Better to stay home and stick with your own. But the people in Moab were eating. And in Bethlehem, Elimelech and his family were not. So he became an economic refugee, snatched up his family and all of his stuff and took off for a foreign land, Moab. Most people don't want to leave their home, but everybody wants the opportunity to survive. And sometimes that means you have to go where it's possible. So to survive, Elimelech, Naomi, Milon, and Kilion left their home and became refugees, just trying to survive. And they probably weren't the only ones. Well, fortunately for Elimelech and his family, Moab's immigration and customs enforcement allowed them to enter the country. I don't know if their immigration was legal or not. We just know that the Border Patrol agents didn't run them down with their horses or beat them. They let them in let them all in together without separating the boys and putting them in cages or anything. They were allowed to come into the country, settle down. They were allowed to start building a life in this new place. And it sounds like they were able to integrate somewhat into the society. Well, maybe not Elimelech and Naomi, but the boys sure did. I'm sure the family kept most of their traditions and faith practices of their people and their homeland, but they were in Moab now, so I'm sure they picked up some of those practices too. It was a comfortable blending. But not long after they got to Moab, Elimelech died. Just getting settled down, and this happens. It's bad for Naomi because in that society, women needed a man or her man's family to take care of them. She could possibly go back to her father's family, but usually after she was married, she was the responsibility of the husband and the husband's family. It's a little bit more complicated than that, but my point is Naomi could have been in trouble with no man in her life. Fortunately, she had her sons, and they were almost grown. The boys grew up and married Moabite women, even though doing so broke all kinds of traditions and cultural norms, and maybe even broke some religious laws. The boys married who they knew and who they loved, and they knew the Moabites, so that's who they married. One married a woman named Orpah, not Oprah, and the other married a woman named Ruth. But then a short time later, both of the sons died too. I can only imagine how horrible Naomi had to feel. I can only imagine how confused and afraid and disappointed and angry she must have felt. Forced to flee her home to survive a famine, forced to become a refugee, forced to create a new life. It couldn't have been easy, but they did it. And they were part of the Moabite society, probably still treated as aliens in some circles, but they were making it. With lots of hard work and a few things that miraculously worked out in their favor, they were doing okay. At least they were eating. I imagine when they settled in Moab, she was starting to feel a little hope again. I imagine she was starting to believe that things would work out fine. I imagine she was starting to feel like she was starting to stand on stable ground, only to have it ripped out from under her by the death of her husband and then both her sons. Once again, her heart is broken. Once again, everything lost. Once again, having to figure it out. Once again, left to her own devices. She had to figure it out. She couldn't quit. I'm sure she shed a ton of tears. I'm sure she spent many sleepless nights. I'm sure her emotions were all over the place. Such trauma. Naomi had to be devastated. And though the story doesn't